The question is that the bill be now declared for the second time. I call the member for Newtown.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise to speak on behalf of the Greens on the Land Acquisition Just Compensation Act Amendment Bill 2016 and wish to express the fact that the Greens will support this bill but have serious concerns about the fact that it is basically a band-aid solution when what is needed is radical surgery. The Act is unfair and it is unjust. It does not provide a just or fair way to treat people in our community when they are having their homes acquired. And while these changes do move to take some improvements, they do not go far enough. This amendment bill is a direct response to the community's outrage over the unfair bullying WestConnex compulsory acquisitions and their demand for the release of the Russell Review, which this government sat on from 2014. And at this point, I would like to acknowledge that this has been a community campaign supported by all sides of the opposition in this place, with the Greens and the Labor Party and others working together to ensure that this government is held to account when it comes to treating people fairly as a result of acquiring their homes. It is pretty clear that this has been a change that has been forced on the government by that community pressure, and it is important that we recognise that this community pressure against the home acquisitions and against the polluting WestConnex motorway will continue to grow and will continue to build as we see the arrogance of this bad Liberal government continue. We have seen, and as has been noted, that there was an earlier report from a joint standing committee on the Office of the Valuer General, chaired by Liberal MP Matt Keane, which was swept under the carpet even though it was tabled in 2013. These documents and the Russell Review, this committee report making 29 recommendations and the Russell Review recommendations with its 20 recommendations, which was tabled in February 2014, have been sat on. What we know is that they have not been brought out into the light of day and that finally we are seeing some shifts and changes only as a result of this significant collective pressure. The bill does not, in fact, remedy the damage and the financial burden put on many of the hundreds of residents across Sydney who have been seriously disadvantaged by this deeply flawed compulsory acquisition process. The proposed amendments, which offer up $50,000 more in compensation or solatium, while obviously a positive step, does not go to the heart of the matter and to the core issue, which is that property owners will not receive reinstatement compensation so that they can restart their lives and purchase a home of equal to that of which the state has taken from them in the area that they live. Let us remember here that the provision of infrastructure in this city or state does not mean that the government has the right to forcibly relocate citizens, and yet this is what is happening by default because of this unjust and unfair processes. Governments have the right to acquire land and properties, but not to impose conditions that force residents to move away from their communities and their homes and the places that they have chosen to live with their families. It is clear from the Premier's comments over the past months that have expressed concern with the way that WestConnex acquisitions have been handled were actually pretty disingenuous, because what we have seen is the amendment to this Act does not seek to rectify the concerns and the problems that people have faced, and that is the issue of reinstatement value. This is one of the core concerns with this bill as it stands. The provision for reinstatement compensation for unique properties which cannot be assessed according to market value does not go anywhere near addressing the need for just compensation to include simple reinstatement value compensation to everyone who has had their properties forcibly acquired. It's important for us to remember in this place that we talk about money and we talk about the amount of compensation given, but what we are talking about here is people's lives and their homes. I've had the experience of meeting a number of people who have lost their homes as a result of the compulsory acquisition process, and was just speaking to a couple of people in the last week to check on how they are doing now that they have had to hand over their keys and move out of their home. No one should be taking lightly the impact that this has had on people. One person who has been someone who I have known very closely for a long time has clearly been shaken by the process of dealing with the people that have been undertaking this process in acquiring their home. It is clear that it is having a huge impact on these communities and on these residents, and it is something that needs to seriously be addressed and considered. It's also important to remember that the issue of home acquisitions is not just one impacting those affected by WestConnex, that it was actually residents within the electorate of Newtown in the Surrey Hills area in Olivia Gardens that had their homes acquired as a result of the light rail construction. Now, we know that originally that would not be needed because the Greens were supportive originally of that light rail going down Oxford Street, and for some reason, unbeknownst to many because of the lack of transparency of this government, these homes were acquired because a decision was made to send the light rail down Devonshire Street. Slater and Gordon's senior compulsory acquisition lawyer, Vincent Butcher, who represents about 70 property owners from Homebush to St Peters, said he was consistently seeing offers 20 to 50% below what the properties were worth. I'd like to quote from the Russell Review on this issue. The Russell Review says, "Where a landowner is dispossessed from a dwelling, the reality is that they are going to have to use the compensation paid to acquire another home. In those circumstances, there is a strong argument to be made that they should obtain compensation on a reinstatement basis. There can be no reason in principle why New South Wales is the only jurisdiction in Australia that does not offer the same form of such compensation." David Russell SC couldn't have made it clearer, and yet somehow this crucial recommendation did not make it into this amendment bill we are seeing before the House, and I ask why not? Could it be that some of the many homeowners who have been significantly underpaid by RMS for the dirty toll road project that is WestConnex, that the cost would blow out so huge that it would exceed what we are now seeing into the $17 billion mark, and with the acquisitions of homes being removed from that total budget because the cost is blowing out so greatly? Or is it just that this government is so cruel and petty and miserly when it proves to serve in the interests of the people that we see billions of dollars of public money being transferred to private hands, and yet at the same time just compensation for people that are losing their homes and having their homes acquired are not being provided? It's important to recognise that the extra salarium that is being offered does not address the problem that business owners face that are forcibly acquired. They are not able to access this additional inconvenience payment. Neither are people that own their homes but were not living in them at the time. Those people will also not be eligible for this form of compensation. While all of the proposed amendments are better to be in the Act than not at all, and they are all improvements, it is important to recognise this issue of reinstatement has not been addressed, and this is the one that impacts most greatly on the community that I represent, because people know that in our area house prices are consistently rising, and we know that actually we need to be able to be providing reinstatement compensation to ensure that those people can continue to keep their children at the local school, so they can continue to be connected with their local church or their local neighbourhood community centre, and that they are not uprooted from their support networks and their neighbourhoods and the people that they have lived with for a period of time as part of their home. I would ask the Minister in response to talk to the transparency of how this place and all of us in this place will know in detail what has been taken up in terms of the number of people that have been contacted that are eligible for this additional inconvenience payment, the number of people that were unable to be contacted. In addition to that, it would be also useful for this House to know from this point on how many people were successful in getting an additional payment and how many people were not successful. Because it is important that we don't just see a headline which announces that tens of thousands of dollars are going to be going to individuals for this inconvenience, but in actual fact, very little money is handed over. The Greens do not oppose this bill as it does make some improvements, but it does not go far enough, and it again demonstrates that this Liberal government is failing to listen to people where it matters and is handing over billions of dollars to build a polluting toll road that actually the community does not want, that has no social licence, but at the same time is being miserly and not handing over the just compensation, the reinstatement value compensation that this community and people that have lost their homes deserve.